We are going to have a lot of fun with this exercise, and I think for every single one of us in this community, we will find a watch in this collection that appeals to us greatly. Thomas is in a bit of a situation. He doesn't consider himself a collector, but he has amassed a fairly reasonable collection over the last 20 years. And now that he has time on his hands, he is thinking about what he should do, whether he should sell watches, whether he should keep them, possibly upgrade to newer pieces to improve the watches that he currently has in his set. And the way this whole discussion came about was because of Wrist Shot Week. It's a show that runs twice a month where the audience, you, the community, send me your wrist shots and I share them with everyone else. And he thought to feature his collection on the live show would be quite exciting. It would give a little bit of vibrance to the discussion. But I really wanted to look at these watches in more detail, and I'll link to the live show in the corner of the screen if you'd like to see the early run-up that happened a few weeks ago. So this is the email attached with the watches that he sent me. Stuck in Paris, I finally found the time to sort my watches out and start thinking if I should upgrade or sell some that I never wear. Started buying watches and vintage watches about 20 years ago. Never intended to collect watches, just accumulated quite a few over the years. Some were given to me, and others I purchased when I had extra money to spare. I've always loved Rolex tool watches, especially the early ones. And then he says in brackets, how original. Some models were already too expensive, so I focused on vintage Tudor, which were more colourful and still affordable at the time. A few years have gone by since then. I've slowed down quite a bit as prices are now outside of my comfort zone. But perhaps by selling some and adding a little, I could upgrade. Instead of telling you which trade I would consider, here are the images of the watches I own. What would you do? As you will see, I am a fan of the latest Explorer, the ultimate daily watch. And then he says, thank you for the videos, thanks for your opinion. So thank you for this, Thomas. I think we'll all enjoy the discussion. And the idea was that I could pitch these watches to you, show them off, and as a community we can all decide on what we would do if we had the opportunity like this to ourselves. And with 50 plus opinions on the subject, we would get a more rounded idea of just where everyone seems to be sitting, because I'm sure there will be some commonality between our thinking overall. But these are the watches, and just before getting into them and talking about them in more detail, I thought to myself, this is a terrible position to be in, actually, realistically, because the watches that he has, there are so many good watches on offer. It's not like he has one or two, he has at least 10 that are well worth keeping for many reasons. Whether it's the modern or the vintage models, I will reiterate again that I think every single one of us can find a watch in this collection that we would be attached to in one way or another. So let's just look at the first selection. I mean, the top row is a collection within itself. We have two Tudor snowflakes, reference 7411. I might butcher the references, don't crucify me. I'm just slowly but surely going to run through them. We have a great condition Tudor Monte Carlo, and then we have a trifecta, a 1675 Fuchsia GMT, a 1655 Explorer 2 Mark I, and then a 5513 on a beautiful rivet bracelet. I mean, the condition of these watches, yes, they are not perfect, but you can see that they are watches that have lived a good life and are still in excellent condition for what they are. And then we move further down the road and we see that he has a modern Milgauss with a green crystal, a modern Tudor Heritage chronograph, a Bulgari chronograph, a Bell & Ross diver, I don't know much about these pieces, and his loved 214270 39mm Explorer. Just in this set alone, I think we could possibly all agree that the watches that he should keep, Rolex and Tudor. And then to be more specific, we can go into those details in a second. Next up in line, we have a few more pieces, all that seem to originate in and around the 70s. And that seems to be quite a common theme with the watches that he's collected, which we will talk about as well. We have an old Tudor Precision. It's interesting because it says Rolex at the top and Tudor at the base. It has a California-esque dial. We have a Triton diver with an integrated styled bracelet, very interesting placement where the crown is, a Fortis chronograph, two more beautiful Tudor Monte Carlos, an Anycar dive watch, I don't know much about this brand, but next to it is a Blancpain Aqualung, and it's an original Blancpain Aqualung. Bear that in mind. And then the final slide holds a lot of the modern watches that he has in his collection. So on the top left, he has a 5146 Calatrava, and it looks to be in white gold. I mean, that's a heavy hitter. Below, he has a Bell & Ross diver, and then he has an Omega Speedmaster Racing Edition. And then across to the more modern watches that we know, He has a Blancpain 50 fathoms, an ETA-powered Tudor Blancpain, a Zinn aviation that looks like a tribute piece. I don't know the name of this model. And on the far side, he has a JLC Memovox. This is a tribute to Deep Sea, if I'm not mistaken. So what can we take away from this series of watches that he has in the collection? I'll say again, it seems like he enjoys the idea of 60s and 70s motifs with the watches that he has. The design styling explains that, whether it's down to the use of colors. Most of these watches have a spot color to them. Just looking at the Tudor Snowflakes and the series of Monte Carlos that he has, all of these watches have orange highlights, light blues, interesting features to the dial arrangements. Then we can also see that he enjoys tool watches. He enjoys watches that have been made with a purpose in mind, that are used for more rugged conditions. But then he also has a beautiful dress watch in the Calatrava. So it's taking it all in that's difficult at first, because he has a watch for virtually any occasion. And another detail that I realized on second thoughts is that he enjoys watches that have a 36912 numeral layout. You notice that's quite a common trend between his Explorers, his Bell & Ross, the Blancpains that he has, the Patek once again. Watches are about self-discovery. I think they're objects that we can be attracted to for the wrong reasons possibly, and over time learn what we really like. So hypothetically then, we say he is not someone who enjoys dress watches, he's someone who prefers sports watches. Should he then sell all the watches that have leather straps? Should he clear out the more expensive pieces like the Patek Calatrava? Since he hasn't told me what watches he wears the most, it's difficult to clarify what works best for him on a daily basis. I would say the first thing that anyone should do with a collection of this size is to focus on wearing one watch per week, and over the course of that week really contemplate if this one is worth keeping. It's a difficult thing to do. Maybe a longer period, maybe 2 weeks would be more worthwhile. But it's thinking above and beyond the short term. It's thinking long term. Would you miss this watch in the collection? Are there other watches in the set that fulfill the same purpose or do more than what others offer? And I think, just to be realistic, he has all of his bases covered with these pieces. Whether he wants the more modern, the more vintage, the more dress-oriented, at this point he has basically every time period from the 50s to the 70s covered extremely well. So it's honing in on what exactly speaks to him the most in that timeline. But if the ball was thrown into my court and I was given the opportunity to think a bit deeper about the subject, it's very difficult. Page 1, this is what I would do. I would sell the Milgauss, the Heritage Chronograph, the Bulgari and the Bell & Ross, the bottom 4, and keep the remaining pieces. Dedicate a watch box to 12 vintage pieces that you really want to keep in great condition. Because as we know, these watches are going to continue to skyrocket. The difference between these and modern pieces is that modern pieces will always remain perfect. The bezels won't fade, the dials won't patina and age. And with these vintage watches, we know that they are all technically piece uniques because they've all aged a different way over time. And you just won't get that effect with modern pieces. So these are no longer just collectibles, these are very much antiques and should remain that way. These watches could be handed down to your children, your grandchildren, and will just continue to build in value. On to page 2. Those 2 Tudor Monte Carlos have to stay, as well as that Blancpain Aqualung. Those 3 can be added to the set of vintage watches. And then on page 4, if it was me once again, sell the Bell & Ross, sell the Speedmaster, possibly sell the Zinn tribute to aviation piece, and even the ETA-powered Tudor. That leaves you then with the Patek, the Blancpain 50 fathoms, and the tribute to Deep Sea JLC. So we are getting through a lot of the watches that are extras, optional extras. So now it's thinking about balancing that area between vintage and modern. Does he have enough modern pieces to satisfy his want for daily wearers? Because most of these vintage pieces, yes, he could enjoy from time to time, but the modern watches are the ones that are going to see the most amount of wear. So he has his coveted Explorer, his Blancpain 50 fathoms, his JLC tribute to Deep Sea Memovox, and his Patek 5146. And I mean, that's just fantastic. You know, weeding out the watches that you don't necessarily want to keep, and then having a solid 12-strong vintage watch collection that lives in a gorgeous mahogany or walnut box that you can pick and choose from on a daily basis. And then having 4 to 5 modern watches that you can wear on any occasion every day of the week. And then with the extra money, it's deciding what you would choose as some watches to really finalize the collection. What could you say? Because it's clear at this point, Thomas has basically experienced virtually everything in this area. He's experienced chronographs, modern vintage pieces. He could get into the realms of high horology a little bit further. And of course, my first recommendation would be to get a Lunga & Zona, possibly a rose gold or even a white gold variant. If he feels adventurous, go for something like a platinum datograph. Because when it comes to high horology, I think he would be someone more drawn to the idea of a chronograph, something with a bit of functionality behind it. And we could consider a chronograph a tool watch. I would say look into JLC and their tribute to 1931 or the beautiful blue duo face, but I don't think it's necessary. What's more important in this collection is to reduce, not necessarily add. And I'm sure we could remove a lot more from this collection to make it all the more rounded. But the vintage watches he needs to keep. But when we think back to his email and the way he worded it, he's always loved vintage sports Rolex pieces. And he has amassed an amazing tight-knit set of watches, whether it's Tudors or Rolexes. Just that alone, those watches really hit every single mark. He has the different color schemes, the different complications, the different signs of wear and age, and of course all of these watches are from different time periods. If we were to go down the Rolex route, 3 watches come to mind. The first, and I think one that would really cap off the collection as just a great all-rounder, is the new Root Beer GMT, the CHNR with rose gold. That makes for a terrific everyday wearer. We could also look at the ceramic Pepsi on a Jubilee or a ceramic Daytona. All 3 of these watches, whether you choose one or many, pay homage to the vintage watches that he has in his collection, which I think is quite poetic. Except he could wear these modern watches every day and not really worry so much about them, but still have a beautiful set of vintage pieces at home to enjoy. This might be quite cliché, but he does seem to be someone who enjoys the motifs from the 70s. If he really feels like going that extra step, maybe Thomas is one of the only people that could put his money into a Royal Oak and a Nautilus, and it would actually blend with the rest of the watches that he has in his collection. But of course, as we know, the prices for those models are just ridiculous. Great thought experiment. It really kept me engaged and kept me thinking. And I really hope all of you can contribute with your thoughts on what you would do if this collection was yours, what you would keep, what you would sell. And in the end, would you go so far to sell off the entire collection and put it into one hyper watch that would just seal the deal? Like I said in the beginning, it's quite the conundrum to be in because the watches that he has, they're just so many great ones. And I find it amusing that he doesn't consider himself a collector as much. He's just been very lucky over the last 20 years. And the watches that he has shared with us really keeps you thinking.